The day is just beginning in one of the most beautiful cities in Italy, Florence. The historic center is full of masterpieces that bear witness to the city's sumptuous past. 600 years ago, it played a key role in the cultural and artistic development of the Renaissance in Europe. Florence is home to a sacred monument that has brought Christian architecture into a new era. The Cathedral of Santa Maria del Fiore, better known throughout the world as the Duomo. In the heart of the old city, the Duomo rises, with its large marble facades and its famous dome, the largest in the world after the Pantheon in Rome. A jewel which was the experimental ground of the greatest masters of the Renaissance. The cathedral, together with Giotto's bell tower and the baptistry of St. John, forms the religious heart of Florence. They are the guardians of a heritage admired each year by millions of visitors. Several generations of architects and patrons followed one another throughout the construction. Their influences mixed with engineering progress to help the building evolve. Arnolfo di Cambio, Giotto, Pisano, for these men, the cathedral site was the work of a lifetime. When the complex was completed in 1436, the facades were inlaid with green, white, and pink marble to echo the baptistry and bell tower. The main facade had to be entirely adorned with sculptures, which was new at the time in Italy. But it will undergo many alterations until its full completion in the 19th century by the architect Floris. The facade that can be admired today, however, is very coherent in style with the initial project. Carved doors, Gothic rosettes, and sumptuous statues punctuate the complex. But such a masterpiece requires constant maintenance. A few streets away from the Duomo, the sounds of metal being struck come from the sculpture workshop. Created at the time of construction, the bottega or workshop of Florence's cathedral is still in operation. Marcello Del Colle has been preserving the Duomo's works of art for 34 years.
Allora, il nostro lavoro fondamentale è quello del
Our job is to redo the parts that have become damaged or deteriorated.
si degradano, che si sciumano, ovviamente.
We must do this integrative work with the materials used at the time, namely Carrara marble. At the cathedral's bottega, we like to work by hand and then return these pieces to our cathedral. Our working techniques have not changed a lot compared to those of the time. We still use the traditional steel mallet and tools. About 80% of our work is done in the traditional way.
At the time of its construction, the cathedral was like a real laboratory of artists who wanted to create a break with art from Middle Ages. Today, the bottega's sculptors perpetuate their expertise.
Questo che a me fra l'altro poi mi fa onore, perché pensare che in questa bottega ha lavorato i più grossi.
It is an honor for me to say that the greatest artists of the time worked here, like Nanni Di Banco, an outstanding Renaissance sculptor who was an employee of the cathedral's workshop.
Questo grandissimo scultore lavorava fisso qui all'Opera di Duomo. Ritengo che sia un lavoro fondamentale e necessario.
Our work is necessary, fundamental to preserve our cathedral. And the people who have worked here are people with incredible talent. And to lose such heritage, if we don't take care of it the way we do, would be a serious mistake.
Another jewel attracts visitors. Facing the main entrance of the cathedral, the baptistry of St. John is one of the oldest monuments in the city. Built in the 11th century, it was there long before the Duomo. It is particularly known for its doors, decorated with bronze bas-reliefs, the Doors of Paradise, and its dome entirely adorned with mosaics of Byzantine influence. For Timothy Verdon, director of works at the Duomo, the baptistry shows Florence's very old desire to impose itself as a city of the arts.
The baptistry of Florence is one of the best examples of the adaptation of the Byzantine style in order to express cultural supremacy. Most of the arched vault is covered with transparent glass tesserae over gold leaves, hence a great wealth. And a great cultural dignity in the choice of style, more important, more noble, more solemn, the ultimate Christian style. For me, the baptistry has a particular emotional charge. By its form, it refers to faith in another temporal space. Our time is punctuated by units of 7, the 7 days of the week, but the first Christians evoked another time, which they called the 8th day. The octagonal form refers to this passage that the baptized person makes that day in that other time, eternity.
The Florentines, supported by this group of experts, were consulted at each stage of the construction. The evidence of the link that they maintained with the cathedral is collected in the museum devoted to the history of the building. Models placed directly around the cathedral were used to convince the corporations that finance the building and the population. Once the cathedral walls were completed, the architects found themselves at an impasse. The roof still had a gaping hole in it, an octagon supposed to support the largest dome ever made of masonry. To find the architect capable of meeting this technical challenge, the Florentines launched a new competition.
So it wasn't until 1417 that Filippo Brunelleschi began to do his research, and that he proposed something completely new to Florence during this period: to build this dome without centering, because that was the main problem. For example, he had observed that in the Pantheon, there is a semicircular self-supporting dome.
Filippo Brunelleschi was a painter, goldsmith, and architect. He convinced the jury of the competition with a revolutionary proposal directly inspired by the ancient buildings of Rome. To build without wooden supports, which was impossible to manufacture for such dimensions, Brunelleschi devises a double shell. A thick inner shell that supports the structural forces of the building, covered with a protective outer shell. The inner shell is formed by 8 large arches in the shape of an ogive. Between these arches, 4 million bricks are arranged in chevrons or spirals. This inner shell unites the 8 sides of the dome and prevents it from collapsing under its own weight. For this unusual project, Brunelleschi had lifting machines manufactured using the power of oxen to lift up to 7 tons of material per day. 16 years later, in 1436, the dome was completed. It is a marvel of sturdiness, which has withstood earthquakes as well as time, a feat that still fascinates architects and historians today. It was only in 1571 that the painter Giorgio Vasari, a pupil of Michelangelo, was commissioned to paint the fresco covering the dome. To compete with the Sistine Chapel, painted by his master at the Vatican, he chose the theme of the Last Judgment. Today, his work is among the most important in the history of art. Like Michelangelo or Vasari, the artists of the Renaissance could be at once painter, sculptor, architect. They were carried by an artistic and scientific emulation unprecedented in history. Astronomy was therefore quite naturally invited into the cathedral. To set the date of Easter to mark Christ's resurrection for Catholics, the church needed to orient itself time-wise. They asked the mathematician Paolo Toscanelli to make a sundial directly on the floor of the Duomo. Massimo Mazzoni, secretary of the Italian Astronomical Society, revisits the arrival of a curious instrument under the dome.
Toscanelli needed an instrument that could calculate the position, inclination, and rotation of the Earth around the Sun. So he asks his friend Brunelleschi to build a gnomon inside the lantern he has just completed. It is an instrument which was used to measure the position of the Sun, the passage of the Sun at midday, and in particular during the solstice.
At 90 meters above the ground, a bronze plate pierced with a hole, the famous gnomon, directs the sunlight inside the cathedral. The sun rays picked up by the instrument are reflected on this meridian line indicating the days and hours. Every year, on June 21st, the day of the summer solstice, when the sun is at its highest in the sky, before one's eye, a circle of light blends into a marble circle inscribed on the ground. This event, the pride of Florentines, attracts a curious crowd every year. This technique, based on the path of the Earth around the Sun, nevertheless contradicted the principles of the Church, which placed the Earth, immobile, at the center of the solar system.
At the end of the 14th, early 15th century, heresy and divisions raged. The Church did not recognize the movement of the Earth around the Sun. Despite this, the Church used Copernicus's measures to calculate the liturgical year. And he said that the Sun was motionless and that it was the Earth that revolved around it. As long as it worked, the Church was ready to accept, despite its ethics, that the Earth revolves around the Sun. Some with theological points of view said that the Pope wanted to upset the rules of creation, but no, he adapted. Others said the Pope wanted to dictate to the moon and the sun how to behave.
Although science and religion have collided many times throughout history, the Duomo will forever remain a place marked by human genius. Time is suspended in the nave of this gigantic cathedral. Here, where the Renaissance came to life in all its forms. Here, where today the sacred mixes with the profane to keep alive one of the most remarkable churches of Christianity.